Thanks very much, everyone. My name's Ian Douglas. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking. Ian Palmer, who's head of IT in the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health, will do a little bit of driving. We're going to try a little bit of live stuff. And Zafar Ali is a learning technologist from KICS, who is involved in trying to support PebblePad throughout the university. So I'm going to talk about this software, which we obtained for a specific purpose, but when we actually got it, we realised that it does have other potential uses. And so I'm going to try and cover some of the features of PebblePad, and you might like to think about what other possible uses you could think of using it for. So one of the drivers really for thinking about e-portfolios at all is the fact that industry and business often tell us that it's skills that are important to them, not just the qualification. So while the qualification is a signpost of certain skills, it's the other stuff that they can demonstrate in evidence. And so now, as things have moved forward, e-portfolios start to have a particular value in terms of this evidencing. We had a particular need, however, in terms of obtaining this software, because a while ago you might recall that we had something called the Research Training Programme for postgraduate research students, and this was where they were expected to do 45 credits worth of additional activity over and above their PhD, but while they were here registered with us. And this was decided after some time not quite fit for purpose, because what was happening is that students, with the collusion of their supervisors very often, were trying to find the least painful way of accumulating these credits rather than it actually having any real value for them. And so consequently the doctoral development programme was introduced, which was a much more bespoke, targeted idea of training and development. But the downside to that, in a way, was the fact that there was no credit rating for what they were doing. And of course we had to take into account, and this was part of the DDP philosophy, training that they were picking up by experience, outside of anything that would be credit bearing that the university would give anyway. And so we had this problem of how do we evidence the fact that they're doing this training and development while they're here. And hence, as indeed the sector as a whole really is doing, is really looking at e-portfolios as a way of producing this type of evidence that they need. We looked at various software packages that do e-portfolios. We were told by KICS that there was no way we'd be able to develop a bespoke system, certainly within the short term, because they were very heavily involved in developing Mold 2 and various other things. And so we had to look to the commercial area. And amongst those, really the market leader was PebblePad. We compared it with a few others and decided that this was the one that actually offered the most flexibility and opportunity for us. First of all, just for the e-portfolio itself, but then when we started to delve into it a bit more, we realised that it also provides a progression and monitoring capability as well as other things. Now, PebblePad describe it as a personal learning space, which is a bit jargonified, but not just an e-portfolio, and we would agree that it's not just an e-portfolio. Now, on the sort of more pedagogical side of the situation, just sort of it's worth just thinking about e-portfolios in this respect. And we tend very often to be thinking about the product of learning. We're often testing the product of learning. What we don't give quite so much thought to quite often is the process by which the students have arrived at that point of learning. And that can be achieved through getting them to produce plans, reflecting on certain experiences and commenting, and their use of appropriate resources. And one of the things also, and I'm sure this will be true here, is that whenever you have a cohort of people and you're teaching them something, they won't all get the same stuff. They'll go away with having learned different things. In fact, of course, some go away not having learned anything at all, which is a problem. But one of the things that we can do if we're thinking about process of learning is having an authentic record of what they've done and how they've achieved that. What journey have they been on, if you like. And so things like PebblePad can provide that sort of opportunity. And it has a dialogic capability within it where tutor and student can talk to each other. And because this is all online, it's all fully acceptable to distance learning students, be they postgraduates or indeed undergraduates. And that sort of dialogue, of course, goes further than the original teaching event, and it promotes further thought and also reflection and further exploration. Now, how are we using PebblePad in the university? Its primary use that we obtained it for was the postgraduate research students, as I mentioned before. But I will give you a couple of other examples that we know about. And we're using it in the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health, and I'll pick this up. Not all other faculties are using it in the same way. So first of all, the training needs analysis that students do when they first arrive, we've created this as an electronic template within PebblePad. Now, not all students in our faculty have actually opted to use the training needs analysis this way because they're guided to a degree by their rather Luddite supervisors. Nonetheless, that doesn't really matter because they can create a training needs analysis in Word, but they can bring it into PebblePad at some stage in the future, whenever they want to. But the advantage of using the PebblePad template version is that it's actually a living document. It's something that they add to, and it has a history behind it all the time. Unlike a Word document, as soon as you've deleted something, it's pretty much gone, unless you do the recovery button straight away. This is there behind all the time. So they identify a particular skill within the training needs analysis. They rate themselves. How do I rate myself on a scale of 1 to 6? And then they subsequently go away and do something to try to develop that skill further. And having done that, they can append evidence that they've done something to improve that skill. And they can append it directly to this particular training needs analysis. And now they would rate themselves, instead of a 2 out of 6, maybe a 4 out of 6, because they've done this particular activity. So they change the rating, but it actually retains the original rating. So you've got this history about what they're doing and how they're developing, all built into that. We also, of course, have got opportunities for things that are a little bit more process-driven that we have to go through. And now, as you well know, we have to have records of supervisory meetings between the student and the supervisor, and that has to be formally recorded every 4 to 6 weeks or thereabouts. So we've got a form that has been built within PebblePad. You can build any number of different versions of this without any difficulty. And then once it's been completed by the student, they can share it with their supervisor. Is this what we agreed? So this could be, again, for a distance learning postgraduate as well, quite easily. And then it's, yes, this is fine, there's a comment option on this, and if they've given it editorial rights, I'll come back to that in a moment, then it can actually be edited by the supervisor as well. And the final version is agreed, and then they click submit. And it goes to a place where the departmental administrator or postgraduate tutor can actually see. So they know that this has taken place. So there is a central record then that can't be deleted, and it's not a piece of paper that can be lost. And so if in the future there are problems with a student, there is that record already there all the time. And then, of course, there's the sort of main part, really, that is the e-portfolio bit. And that is a record of all of the experiences that a student chooses to put into it. And this might be things like presentations they've done to the department, or perhaps at a seminar or a conference, the details about their DDP experiences. We've asked them to do an e-portfolio of one of the very few compulsory modules for PGRs, which is Research Ethics and Integrity module, and to actually do the reflections on those cases and put those into a portfolio. So they accumulate all of this material into their portfolio, and they can design any number of these that they want to. They're very easy to design. It's a drag and drop sort of system to create text boxes and pictures and those sorts of things. And then they append evidence to these as hyperlinks very readily. And then they can share it, as I've mentioned already, with the supervisor, and they can submit it. And the supervisor or whoever can add comment or feedback and then set up dialogue if that seems appropriate for this particular activity. Now we're going to try and do a little bit of a live version. This is the URL for PebblePad, and you'll notice that there's /Sheffield. If you don't put /Sheffield in, you go to their home page rather than our home page, which isn't quite as useful. And we're rather hoping that the technology will allow us to do this. Okay, so this is the landing page that they would get here. And you'll notice along the top here there are some blue tabs. These blue tabs are each drop-down menus. So if we start on the left, this Add New. Add New means anything new that that person wants to bring into their PebblePad account. It can be something they create within PebblePad, or it can be a file that they bring in. So you'll see the second item down there is file. So that can be Word file, PowerPoint file, video file, any file format pretty much they can bring in, and they store it within PebblePad. The original is wherever it originally was, of course, still. And then you'll notice that these other things here, post, that's just a set of notes. CV, they can build a whole range of CV items and then just accumulate them there and then create a CV in subsequent time. There's plans, action plans, and all sorts of other plans that they can create. And PebblePad has made a set of templates. Now these templates are really designed, generally speaking, rather well, and one of the things in a lot of them is to get the student to reflect a little bit on what they're doing and what they're learning. But if for any reason the student or indeed a member of staff thinks that those templates aren't quite right and they'd like a different version, you can make new templates fairly easily. We've got things like experiences, reflections, and then achievements. And each of these things are templates that they can easily build. The second one there is Design New, and this is where they're going to do things like, in particular, the web folio. Now that's a term that PebblePad uses for an e-portfolio. They call it web folio because it's actually a web page. It's their own personal URL for this particular activity. Okay, so and then these other things I've mentioned like CV and so on. And then the View menu contains one thing that's particularly important, and that's something that PebblePad calls assets. They work on the principle that anything that a student has gone to the trouble to create is of value and therefore is an asset. So they call it an asset store, which is like their filing cabinet. And you'll notice here a whole load of stuff. This, after a while, gets enormously long, and so you do need a way of filtering that. And one of the ways you can filter that is using what they call tags. Now tags are a little bit like the dividers that we put in a filing cabinet, but it's a bit more efficient than that. It's also more efficient, if you like, than the way we store, say, documents on our computer. So we tend to put them into a folder. We think, where shall I put that? I'll put that in that folder, and 3 weeks later you can't remember where you put it. So you go into the search menu and you try and find it, and you have to think about what was that file called, or what was the key word, or something like that, and if you're lucky you find it. But sometimes you don't. One of the values here is that you can add these luggage labels, if you like, or tags as they're called, and you can append any number of them to that particular item, which then gives you a lot more searching capability. So if you don't get what you want with one tag, you'll probably get it with another one, so you can just think about the words that you might use. So tagging helps just sort of to sort out a whole long list of stuff. You'll notice that there's 3 tabs here: By Me, For Me, and With Me. So By Me are things that I've made myself in my account, or files that are mine that I've brought into my account. For Me are things that have been shared with me. So that someone sent something to me for me to look at. I can take a copy of it without any problem, and I could add a comment if I want to, but I can't edit it. And then the With Me is things that I can edit, that the person who's created it has given me that right. Now that's it, highlights an important feature. Anything that is made within a PebblePad account belongs to that person. No one else can see it unless they choose to share it or submit it to a particular place. So it remains entirely private. So even though I might be one of the global administrators for PebblePad in the university, I can't see things that an individual student has made in their account. I can only see them when they've been submitted to a particular place or that they've shared with me for a particular purpose. Okay, so that privacy I think is an important thing to pick out. And then that thing that Ian's pointed to there called Resource Centre is basically a list of resources that we've made available for a student. So members of staff might create something like a template or a set of information or information about a task they want the student to do, and that can be put in this resource centre. And anyone who's linked to a particular place, they can have that resource made available to them. So it might be a tutor group or a whole cohort of students in a year or just an individual person. Okay. So that's the view menu, and I think that's probably all we need to talk about. Now the next thing is really the sort of moving away from that, which is the interface the student will use, to the more back end, which is the thing that staff and tutors and administrators will use. They call that Atlas within PebblePad, and basically the university is divided into regions within PebblePad. Within this part of it, each region is a faculty, and then within each faculty we create what we call a workspace, and that workspace will have a particular label, you make as many as you like. So in our faculty we've made one for the DDP in each of the major departments, so one in the dental school, one in the medical school, one for SHA, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we've got those, and then within those workspaces we've asked students to do a particular set of assignments. So here you can see the assignments: training needs analysis, e-portfolio, supervisory meeting forms, learning plan, and so on. So if we go to supervisory meeting forms, then there's a lot of students in the list. You can filter that list by putting in a student's name and pull up all of the ones that person's done. So this particular student has done this form. This is a template form that we've made, and there's something about the student, the date of the meeting. If we can scroll down, we've got things like how does the student rate themselves on a 1 to 6 scale in terms of their progress so far, and then what does the supervisor think as well. So the supervisor fills that bit in. And what you can do is you can run reports on most of the things within PebblePad, and you can even ultimately drill down into, does the supervisor and student differ by, let's say, more than 2 within that particular parameter, which might then tell you that these students and their supervisors are clearly not agreeing with the progress, and there might be a progress problem with that student. Then there's information about what has the student done since the last time we had the meeting, what have we agreed that they will do next, and are there any problems that we should list, and then the date of the next meeting. That's an example, and then over on the right hand side there you'll see these little grey tabs. That one there is comments. So the supervisor, for example, can add a comment: you forgot to add such and such, or this is not what we agreed, or this looks fine, or whatever. Okay, and then the student can submit that to a workspace, and hence we get that list that we showed you earlier on of those, and that can be drilled into, and all of the comments are held and stored, and if you want to look back at any stage on any particular supervisory meeting form, you can see what comments are appended to it. Okay, now let's move on to a couple of examples of e-portfolio. So this is a sort of list of students here of e-portfolios, as you can see down here, and the names of the students. And we've got one here. She's a first-year student, and she's personalised this by putting in a nice photograph of herself. She describes a little bit about herself, which department she's in, and then down the left-hand side we've got a whole range of headings. We encourage the students to do certain headings, but it is entirely up to them, so we're only giving them guidance on what sorts of headings they might have as separate pages. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. I thought you might like this one. This is personalised, but I don't think this is actually Vicky. I think it's the fact that she works in the academic unit of reproductive medicine, which has put that in there. But what you'll see here, she's got the same sorts of things down here. If we look at, let's say, supervisory meetings, she has actually produced these as Word forms, rather than within PebblePad. And so she just brought them in as a Word form. And you'll see, oh, it's actually a PDF, sorry. So you can open the PDF and have a look at that. And then the final example here is, this is a second year student. He's got similar sorts of things. He's personalised this with this rather gaudy flock wallpaper background.
I hate the flock wallpaper, but I can't work out how to take it out the system.
But, you know, it provides an element of personality, I guess. And what he's done here, he's got here, we clicked on presentation. So here he's got information about all the presentations that he's done. Okay, and this might be a PowerPoint presentation, a poster which he's got down here as a PDF. That's a PowerPoint presentation. And all of these things can be clicked on and opened by someone who has access and rights to do so. Okay. So if, for example, this Robert decided that he was interested in going and working with Joe Bloggs in UCL in London, he knew that there was going to be a job coming up, because he'd heard through the grapevine or he'd met him at a conference. What he can do is he can send him a copy, he can tailor a particular portfolio, make sure he hasn't got anything that's nasty in it, but what he can do is he can send all of this stuff, and that's a three-dimensional CV. It's not a one-dimensional piece of paper. Okay, so it has an awful lot more impact than a CV does by having actual ability to see the PowerPoint file that the student has actually presented somewhere. Okay. So just now to go on to the final couple of slides, which is really about other uses. Sorry. I should just say that the login is your university name, username and password, and because of that, all staff and students in the university have access to PebblePad. You don't need to register. So other uses in the university, other than the PGR one, which we've given you a bit more information about, Laura using it for undergraduate student training with a similar sort of idea. How are they going to compete in this very, very competitive market for law students? So what they're doing is they're getting them to do an e-portfolio of their achievements, and within achievements we don't just mean specific grades and credits they accumulate, but it's all of the other stuff that they've done. It might be public engagement activities, it might be work experience that they've gone and had in a law firm. And this has a particular advantage for the tutors because it gives them a much fuller picture of the individual and how they're doing and where they are within their academic development. So they can look for gaps and give advice much more readily by just being able to look at their portfolio. And also, when it comes to them leaving and moving on somewhere else, that tutor has a much greater ability to give a more in-depth reference because they've got everything there, rather than having to look at their academic record and that's all they can see. So it has that advantage. And what they actually do, the students produce what's called a workbook, which is a set of templates that have been pre-created, and they continuously add to these during their time at university. So they're adding it year on year, and it's building up into this workbook that the academic and personal tutors can view. And then the final one is in the Department of Social Work, Social Science, and here we've got an MA in Social Work. Now, for this particular Masters, it's important that they conform to the professional and regulatory standards for this profession, and so they're using PebblePad to capture their reflections, which is part of that development and the evidencing of it. Okay, and this will include then analysing and commenting on cases that they get involved in, considering what went well at the end of the day and what didn't go so well when they interact with particular families or something, reflecting on what it actually means to them, and I think particularly importantly, sort of how that learning has influenced their future work or their future learning. So those are, if you like, things that can quite readily be done, and dialogue given from the tutors for that sort of activity as well.